From the Western Mass News studios in Springfield, this is Western Mass News Getting Answers with Dave Mattson.
Thanks for joining me for this week's edition of Western Mass News Getting Answers. I'm Dave Mattson. Hope you're doing well. Every week I'm joined by political business leaders and other newsmakers to talk about the issues that impact you. This week, we're getting answers from the president and CEO of the Eastern States Exposition, Cassidy. The Big E opens in West Springfield in 12 days, back after being canceled in 2020. Because of COVID-19. Time permitting, we're going to focus on how the fair is dealing with COVID, a possible mask mandate, and other safety precautions being put in place. We're also going to touch on animal rights and the problems in years past, the Big E looking at other streams of revenue, and of course, what you can expect at this year's Big E, from entertainment, food, exhibits, agriculture events, and competitions. Gene, good to see you.
Good morning. It's great to see you, David.
It's been way too long.
That it has, and I'm glad you're back.
Way too long. It's good to see you.
And I'm glad I'm back too, actually.
So, I'm thinking about it now. It's like at this time in 2 weeks, the Big E is going to be in full swing. It'll be a first weekend.
It'll be, and we're all very excited. It's a strange time for everybody, but building out the fair after a 1-year absence is certainly a challenging. It's been a challenging time for us, to be sure.
So as we go into it, I think the last thing we expected is you were heading into having the Big E this year was an uptick in COVID. And I know one of the things that West Springfield is talking about, and as of this broadcast, they haven't decided yet, is a possible mask mandate in West Springfield. What kind of an impact could that have on you?
Well, it's, the Delta variant is what everybody's focused on and concerned about. So we're watching very carefully what's happening with the number of cases. We've been in touch with our friends at Bay State Medical. We have a number of doctors that actually work for us during the fair that staff our triage. So we're watching very carefully the numbers. There is a consideration. We've talked to the town. As a matter of fact, we've had a couple of meetings just in the past 10 days. We're watching the numbers carefully, monitoring what's happening, and considering, dependent upon those numbers, whether or not a mask mandate would be required, at least indoors on the fairgrounds. So, what does that mean? It's happening in other places. Unfortunately, it's had some ill effects. The New York State Fair is running now as we speak. They have a mask mandate. Their attendance is down more than 50%. And they lowered their admission price dramatically too, from $12 to $3. But there's an inherent sort of sensibility, I suppose you could call it, among some people to sort of react negatively and not want to participate, which is too bad. But I think in order for people to be comfortable. If they have a desire to wear a mask, they should absolutely be masked up. And people who haven't been vaccinated certainly should have a mask on. And our advertising campaigns are going to reflect that. We have a tandem campaign that we're running actually for the fair called Good, Clean, Fun. And in that campaign, there's a QR code, and people can become educated about the requirements on the fairgrounds and actually educated perhaps about COVID in general. And certainly it's a tremendous promotion towards vaccinations, which we will be offering on the fairgrounds.
You will be on the fairgrounds?
Yes. Through the West Springfield Health Department, Jean Galloway is the lady who runs the health department for West Springfield. Marvelous job. We've worked with her for, I had probably more than 20 years, very closely. The fair has to be concerned about bugs all the time. Mm-hmm. We're hyper-focused, as we should be, on COVID at the moment, but there's so many other considerations that people generally don't have to think about, because we take tremendous strides and steps with West Springfield Health to ensure their safety. So, we're worried about E. coli on a grand scale. With each generation, our children are further and further removed from the barnyard or from agriculture engagement. And so the susceptibility.
That was one of those words I always avoided.
I felt like I was on a roller coaster. The susceptibility towards E. coli increases with each half generation. So we need to make sure that we keep people protected from that. There's equine encephalitis, triple E they call it, very, very, very bad. So we have to make sure that our surfaces are clean, our buildings are clean. The interesting thing too is when there was the pandemic of 1918, it's Spanish flu, we didn't have infectious disease doctors. So the government and local health people turned towards the agriculturalists. It was a farmer that helped get around that curve way back then. The farmer had been dealing with epidemics in his flock and field for all of millennia. And that's who we turned to, and that's where the term herd immunity came from. So you got to 61% or so, and the herd was protected. So we're very clean. We spent a lot of time, money, and effort before COVID, and now we're spending even more of all of those things to make sure people are protected.
And I think, in years past, anybody who's visited the Big E knows that. It's like it's one of the cleanest places you could go, so it's just, let's step it up a notch.
And that's exactly right.
Any concern that this could become a COVID cluster event?
Well, I think, anybody in a position like mine or anyone who works at the Eastern States has that in the back of their mind, which is a good thing to have in the back of your mind because it's going to help you do better. We at this point I've been to the Minnesota State Fair, the Minnesota State Fair, the Wisconsin State Fair, the Florida State Fair. No fair that's run, and we're talking large fairs, 850,000 to 1.3 million. No fair that's run has been a super spreader. So people tend to throw that word around a lot. There's been no indication that that's the case. Yes, we're very concerned about that, which is why we're running this campaign to encourage people to protect themselves and others.
Nice thing about this too is you're not going into this blindly. You've had a chance to see other big fairs like this and what they've experienced. So there's
exactly right. So there's some misconceptions about some things I think too. If you're in sunlight, the UV rays are the purest way to eradicate that bug. And many others. So, much of the fair is out of doors, and I'm sure, there's going to be people who are not going to be comfortable. They're not going to come. Or there's people who are not going to be comfortable in buildings, so they'll only avail themselves of that which is outside. And I think those are good, sensible things for all potential patrons to be thinking about.
Now, as far as vendors and entertainers, any reluctance on their part that you find this year to participate?
No, we have not. The entertainers are dying to get back to work.
Yeah.
Certainly they're focused on safety, so there are precautions that are being taken to make sure that they are protected from others and others are protected from them. So we've made some changes in presentation, but no, we have had a couple of cancellations, unfortunately, but the cancellations stem from the fact that we had two big acts, well actually three big acts, coming from Great Britain. Two bands, and then my friend Mike Brewer, who helps us with our car show. Mike is the host of Wheeler Dealers, which is on the Motor Trend network. None of them can get into the United States because they've been vaccinated with the AstraZeneca vaccination.
Oh, okay. Which is not
that
approved,
is not recognized by the CDC here. So we've lost some participation from Western Europe. Unfortunate. Same with some of our Irish friends. AstraZeneca, that vaccination is not recognized, so they can't come.
Now, as you look at the possible mask mandate, but recommending that people wear masks if they're in these buildings. What other things are you doing at the Big E to keep attendees as safe as possible? And we touched on some of that.
Well, I think we've tuned up a more frequency of cleaning, and frankly, now there are different chemicals that are responsive to COVID specifically. So some of our chemical mixtures will be changing. The foggers will be using a different product in order to protect people from surfaces and things like that. So that's a big step, I think, in the right direction.
Gene, what would have happened? What do you think could have happened if you had to cancel the Big E this year? I mean, canceling it last year was huge. It's really never been done in our generation.
Yeah.
And it's the last thing you wanted to see for this year.
Interestingly, when the fair has been canceled in history, and it has for the Second World War, the First World War, the United States government took over the property. So the fairgrounds was able to sustain itself. So this is the first time we've been closed with no fair and no income. A lot of people depend on the eastern states. Many of them are local, but many of them come from some distances, some from great distances. We're talking about crafters, vendors, food concessionaires, but also the agriculturalists. So cattle and their growers from across North America, and in normal times from Canada as well. Without us, they do not have their showcase, and the young people who are involved in agriculture through FFA and 4-H, they're missing out, and that concerns, as a fair manager, that concerns me quite substantially, because these young people, they matriculate in agriculture, and the Eastern States is part of that matriculation, and it would be like you and I going from middle to high school, and if they miss a beat, they might miss the integrity of their interests. It could interrupt them, and I think COVID, because of COVID, and a decline in engagement, it's going to have a negative effect on agriculture throughout the United States, but particularly here in the Northeast, for a long time to come. I hope we can recover from it. So that's one of the concerns, sort of in the background, somebody like me has to be thinking about. But if the fair wasn't to have opened again, Dave, we would not be able to survive as an organization. What most people probably are not aware of is that the Eastern States was founded on philanthropy. Good, strong, successful, interested, engaged people, businessmen and businesswomen, in the form of Mrs. Helen Storrow. Sure. They paid to create, they gave of their own earnings to create the Eastern States. But we have been running for the past 2 generations under our own head of steam. And the vacuum that would create in our greater Springfield economy is approaching $750 million. So the health and well-being of this organization is important to our Hamden County, greater Springfield economy on an incredibly large scale that most people wouldn't be cognizant of. Sure. If we were to fail, it would have a lasting effect, because I don't believe there's anything that could backfill that economic output.
No, indeed. All right, Gene, we've got a lot more to talk about. Of course, one of the things we talked about is this year's fair, but we also want to look at animal rights, the biggie looking at other revenue streams, and a new international role for Mr. Cassidy when we come back. Welcome back to Western Mass News, Getting Answers. My guest this week is the president and CEO of the Eastern States Exposition, Gene Cassidy. A biggie opening in 12 days from today. Gene, one of the things that we want to touch on briefly is animal rights activists. They've really continued to oppose the use of elephants at the biggie after the deaths of a couple of elephants in 2019, one of them at the biggie. But where do things stand on that issue, not only with elephants, but animals in general, just to address that?
Well, we have, of course, we have a great deal of production livestock on the fairgrounds, but the elephants and those type of exotics that have been on the fairgrounds for at least as long as I've been alive, I'm sure more, they bring an element that we're actually proud to represent. I mean, young people and families, and the Discovery Channel is only worth so much. Having an opportunity for an urban youth to be exposed to an elephant, I think, is something that's meaningful. These elephants are incredibly well cared for. I have tried to get an elephant to the fair this year. I was unable to do so because the animal activists are making it more and more difficult in order for us to provide that sort of an outlet. People, and I respect their opinions, but I'm somebody who has made my career in this industry for nearly 30 years, and I like to boast about the fact that my office at the Eastern States is within walking distance of the house I was born and raised in. So I remember the fair as a child. I remember the Forest Park Zoo as a child, and the exposure that I got, and the appreciation that welled up in me for these animals. In this day and age, these animals are incredibly well cared for, and I think that people who are activists in that vein are very disconnected. They're unaware. And I think it's been a detriment to the population at large because, like I say, young people and frankly all people, they can't get the exposure to it, and that's too bad.
So in your mind, this is really an extension of the agricultural aspect of the fair itself.
No question about it. Because it all translates. If you don't have a happy, healthy hen, she's not going to lay eggs for you. If you don't have a happy, healthy cow, she's not going to give milk to you. And if you don't have a happy and healthy elephant, then that elephant, with the sweep of her trunk, it could be the end of you. So yes, it's all an extension of that exposure and getting people interested, frankly.
Let's talk about looking at other revenue streams for the beginning. In the last year, just watching from the outside looking in, you've been very creative. One of the elements is the outdoor movies, the drive-in, and I know it's been really successful, but food events, using some of the Big E buildings for storage. This something going to continue beyond COVID? Because it does seem to be working very well.
I think we might see some elements of it for sure. We had a difficult time sustaining our organization and to put the fair on, of course, is a Herculean lift, as everybody can probably imagine. But keeping people employed, was important in order so that we could keep our team together. So we did create some of these other opportunities. Economically, they weren't very meaningful to the Eastern States, but they were very meaningful to the people who we partnered with to bring in. For example, I was very concerned about our local food vendors. They had no income in 2020. So what we did was we assembled a group of them. We brought them in to do the food drive-through, and for some of them, it was the only income they had during the pandemic year. So, we were trying to keep the infrastructure together, if you will, because nationally, a number of concessionaires went out of business. Nationally and locally, a number of mom and pop crafters closed up because they could not sustain themselves. So our mission was twofold: to try to generate some resource for the organization to keep the team together, but also to keep the shop, the small industry that relies on us as an outlet, to keep them active as well.
You are now chairman of the International Association of Fairs and Expositions. So that's a global representation for you. So what does that entail? What's that role entail?
So the organization is a global organization insofar as we have membership from Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Mexico, Thailand. The biggest fairs, as you might imagine, are in the United States. Some larger fairs in Canada, and this has been a very interesting year because of the pandemic. Sure. All of us have been affected. The great thing about my ability to represent as chairman from the International Association is that we share everything. Fairs don't compete with each other. It's a very interesting industry. I spent the beginning of my career in the public accounting business, had a ton of clients, all of whom, if they were in a similar business, they were competing like mad. But that's not how we work in the fair industry. We rely on each other for agriculture, for production of livestock, and the shows that we create. And so we're able to share best practices. So although it's been difficult for the industry, it's been good for the Eastern States and for me personally to be chairman at this particular point in time, keeping people together, making sure lines of communication are open, having access to the CDC, being able to be informed at the highest level from not just our own government, but from Western European government, Australia. They're sort of an outlier, to be sure, because of their distance from the rest of the world. But the fact is, they've dealt with COVID quite differently than we have, very severely and not as successfully. So it's been interesting, to be sure, and I think, like I say, the Eastern States and myself, hopefully I've been able to make a contribution to the industry as well.
All right. Gene, thanks. When we come back, we're going to tell you what you can expect at this year's edition of the Big E. Back with more of Western Mass News Getting Answers. I'm pleased to be joined this week by the president and CEO of the Eastern States Exposition, Gene Cassidy. Gene, let's look at this year's Big E. Again, opening 12 days from today. What can visitors expect this year?
So, my hope is to deliver a fair. Our team has been working very, very diligently. They're all excited. We want to deliver a fair that people come to get back together at. The place where I frequently use this expression, the American way of life is celebrated at its best. So this year's fair is going to look, hopefully, just like the 2019 fair. We're going to have we've made some strategic changes in order to create a little bit more space for people. Some of those vendors who I may have indicated earlier may have slipped out of the business because of COVID. We did not fill all of the spaces. So it'll give people a bit more room to line up, and we'll see a little change in our parades. Hope that people, I think, are going to really enjoy them more. We have some great entertainment lined up, and actually yesterday or day before yesterday, we released our latest food trends. So there's some new exotic things to take advantage of on the
exotic
fairgrounds.
but comfort food.
A lot of comfort food, actually, and
all the Big E food's comfort food. Come on.
Much of it is actually for a lot of reasons. But so we have a great lineup of entertainment, and my hope is that everybody who comes to the fair leaves the fair feeling better than they did when they walked in. As we get around this bend of the pandemic, being together, we're social animals. And isn't this the greatest place really to be, to see each other, families, friends?
Really something that all of us need right now.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think as we've all been locked down, I've had a little bit of an advantage because I have been traveling to other events.
Sure.
But I have seen nationally that the warm reception of the return of the fair has been overwhelming.
Now, you're offering a lot of different incentives, value passes, discounts, deals on fair food favorites, too. So a lot of enticement.
Yeah, everybody should go visit thebige.com because there's a lot of opportunity for, to get a deal. And you'll be able to take advantage of the schedule, which is really important because there's so much happening. If you don't take a few minutes to plan your day at the event or your couple of days at the event, whatever it might be, you're gonna walk around wondering what to do next because you'll be overwhelmed by it.
Agricultural events, all the competitions will be back too?
They will be back. There's a bit of a change. Agricultural extension, which is run through the land grant colleges, is in control of 4-H. We've had to make some concessions because 4-H throughout New England, and each state is a little different. So we'll see a reduction in the 4-H presence during the fair. We've had other 4-H events outside of the fair to sort of make up for it because, again, we're all of us at the Eastern States are trying to create opportunity for the 4-H youth in agriculture. But we'll have, except for the 4-H shows, our ag production will be the same.
Now, all we need is the weather to cooperate. Let's get this rain out of the way, right?
Well, each day it rains, I say to myself, okay, that's rain in the bank that won't happen between September 17th and October 3rd.
Gene, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing you at the Big E.
Best wishes, Dave, and I look forward to seeing you and everybody at the fair this year.
All right. Now, we should let you know that if you want more information about the Big E, you can go to bige.com. And, of course, that starts September 17th through October the 3rd. I'm Dave Mattson. I want to thank you for joining us this week for Western Mass News Getting Answers. My thanks again to Gene, too. Stay safe, stay well, and we hope you'll join us next week.